Hello, I am Mary Dalgleish, an agricultural consultant with SEC Consulting. And today I'm going to provide you with a toolkit of information regarding employees' wages and other benefits that farm employees often receive. First of all, we will take a look at minimum wage that employees are due. The minimum wage is set by the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board, and for most employees currently it is £8.21 per hour. However, it is worth noting that if your employees are working towards qualifications or have qualifications, their minimum wage will differ. So, if they are working towards the qualifications, they can be paid at a lower rate of £5.30 per hour for a period of 18 months. However, the qualifications do require to be in agriculture or horticulture at certain levels. If your employees already have gained these qualifications, they are then entitled to a top-up on top of the £8.21 of £1.25 per hour. All minimum wage details are set by the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board and can be found in their handy guide. It is the responsibility of the employee to submit timesheets. However, it's the responsibility of the employer to provide timesheets to be completed. Timesheets can be completed weekly or monthly. All timesheets should be kept by the employer for 3 years to show the records of hours worked and that pay given matched hours worked. Again, the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board has a very good monthly and weekly timesheet example, which would be a useful place to start if you're unsure of what needs to go in a timesheet. Working long hours is something that is often required in agriculture. However, the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board have set regulations on working long hours. The working time regulations limit a working week to 48 hours. Employees can choose to work more than 48 hours if they wish. However, there has to be something in writing from the employee to the employer to say they have opted in to do this. It's also worth noting as an employer that the employee can ask that agreement of working long hours to come to an end at any time. Timesheets must be kept which show the actual hours worked by an employee. So timesheets must be changed to reflect the extra hours that are worked, and again those timesheets must be kept for 3 years. Overtime payments. Overtime must be paid when an employee works more than 8 hours a day or 48 hours in a week. So overtime is only paid for once. So employees are either paid overtime because they worked more than 8 hours in a day or because they worked more than 48 hours in a week. They don't get paid for going over both these time periods. So therefore, it gives you flexibility that if there's a particularly busy day where your employee is going to have to work more than 8 hours per day, then you can give them the option to then do a shorter day later in the week so that they don't exceed 48 hours in the week and therefore require to be paid overtime.
If an employee has worked with you for more than 26 continuous weeks, the thresholds for which overtime pay must be paid changes.
And it then becomes that overtime pay must be paid when an employee works more than 8 hours a day or 39 hours in a week. So therefore, as an employer, it's worth keeping a close eye on how many weeks are worked and ensure that you're meeting all of the regulations. Regardless, the same rate of overtime pay is given. So overtime is paid at the minimum hourly rate for that employee times 1.5. For example, workers working towards qualifications, it would be £7.95 per hour for overtime. Houses are often provided to agricultural workers as an added benefit to the job. Houses are the one benefit that can be charged as part of the minimum wage. The maximum set by the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board that can be charged as part of the wage for a house is £1 per week. So you can deduct £1 per week off an employee's wage if they have a house, even if that takes that employee's wage to below the minimum wage for their situation. However, realistically, if you are providing a house of a reasonable standard, £1 a week is not going to be sufficient. Therefore, you can come to an external agreement with your employee about an equivalent rent that should be charged for this house. So by external agreement, I mean that does not come out of their wage. So they would still be paid what wage they should be paid per the minimum wage regulations. However, you could then have an agreement with your employee that they then pay you a certain amount back per week or per month as a rent for their house. It is expected that that rent would be less than the market rent rate. As employers, you do not have the right to say to employees that they require to live on the farm and pay X amount for their house. Employees can choose to live off the farm if they wish. However, it's in an employer's favour to have an employee on site at all times. So therefore, it is recommended coming to a mutual agreement with your employee about what rent should be charged for their house and making sure that it's a reasonable amount of money that is not going to deter them from living on the farm. Just a quick note on seasonal workers accommodation. Employers can charge a maximum of £7.55 for each day that seasonal workers are residing on the farm. So by residing on the farm, it would quite often be residential caravans or possibly other accommodation. So there is an amount set, again by the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board, a maximum amount that can be charged for that accommodation regardless of what the accommodation is. For workers who require a dog to successfully carry out their job, there is a mandatory and non-taxable allowance which they are required to be paid. And that is an extra £6.24 per week for up to 4 dogs. If your employee has dogs and requires those dogs to carry out their job, you are required to pay them that extra allowance on top of their wage. Holiday entitlement for agricultural workers is once again set by the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board. The holiday year will run from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, and the holiday entitlement allowed depends on the number of days of the week that an employee works. Where an employee works various numbers of days throughout the year, then you should calculate the average number of days across a 12-week period to work out their holiday entitlement. The Scottish Agricultural Wages Board Guide is a fantastic resource to see exactly how many days holiday your employee would be entitled to based on how many days of the week they work. But for example, if an employee works 5 days a week, they are entitled to 28 days holiday a year. If an employee starts with you partway through the year, their holiday entitlement is reduced appropriately. So for example, if an employee starts with you on the 1st of August, they're then 50% of the way through the year and therefore are entitled to 50% of their holiday allowance. So for example, if they work 5 days of the week, they would normally be entitled to 28 days holiday, but if they only start on the 1st of August, they're only entitled to 14 days up until the holiday year ends on the 31st of December, when they would then get full entitlement the following year. If an employee chooses to terminate their contract, then it is worth noting that they would be entitled to payment in lieu for remaining holidays calculated up to the termination date of their employment. Every year, workers are entitled to 2 extra days on top of their annual entitlement, and these are deemed special holidays. These 2 days are Christmas Day and New Year's Day. If one year either the date or the day of Christmas Day or New Year's Day fell on a day that your employee is not normally working, they would be entitled to their next working day as a holiday. To qualify for agricultural sick pay, workers must have been in continuous employment with that employer for 1 year. Sick pay is not paid for the first 3 days of each absence. Sick pay entitlement for an employee is calculated by multiplying the number of days they work in a week by 13. So for example, if an employee works 5 days a week, you multiply that 5 by the 13 and that employee is entitled to 65 paid sick days a year. Where a worker's absence continues beyond 52 weeks, they are then entitled to an extra 13 weeks of sick pay. The Scottish Agricultural Wages Board provide an excellent resource regarding sick pay in their wages guide for employees and employers, and I would recommend consulting that if you have a situation where you require to pay an employee sick pay. This resource will also give you information on the responsibilities that an employee has to inform you about their absence and provide the necessary information. And finally today we will cover dismissal. The notice period required to be given to an employee when being dismissed depends on the number of years service they have given you. So for example, if an employee has worked with you for between 2 months and 1 year, they are entitled to 1 week's notice. Any service above that, it is 1 week's notice for each year of continuous employment. So for example, if an employee has worked with you for 5 years, they are entitled to 5 weeks notice. That is up to a maximum of 12 weeks. So even if you have a very long serving employee, the maximum notice period they require to be given is 12 weeks. So that is information on employees' wages and other benefits that farm employees are often provided with. There are supporting links and other documents to back up the information provided in this video that can be found on the Employing People section of the Farm Advisory website. There you will find the Scottish Agricultural Wages Board guide that I referred to frequently through this video.